Testing, 1, 2, 3. Due to the success of Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, Toho thought it would be a good idea to follow it up with a direct sequel, starring King Ghidorah as the star villain yet again. All of the big boys were here. Ashiro Honda, who at this point was the go-to man to direct special effects heavy sci-fi extravaganzas, Shinichi Sekizawa, the underrated king of writing for these blockbusters, Eiji Tsuburaya, the special effects mastermind, and finally, Akira Ifukube, the sound that tops his glorious Gooberberry Sunrise of a collab. This was also one of the first films that was an actual collab with the United States, which explains some star power I'll go into later. Every one of these troopers' efforts resulted in Invasion of Astro Monster, the most emblematic film of this period of Kaiju Eiga, with the biggest scope ever put to screen from a Godzilla film at this point in the character's history. The last film, Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, was the definition of the word classic. Everything about the film feels like a big event, but even with that film's technical achievements, it doesn't necessarily impress on the writing aspects. There's nothing abhorrently wrong with it, but to say the conflicts within its story were as developed as they could have been would be a lie. But luckily, the very next year, they had another chance at shooting for the stars in Toho's attempts to tell a grand story that left you wanting more. Invasion of Astro Monster starts off with a starborn mission to the newly discovered Planet X, where Fuji, played by Akira Takarada, and Glenn, played by Nick Adams, eventually find themselves in the custody of an undiscovered, intelligent race of beings. These characters, called Exilians, appear to want peace with the humans, but are desperate for their help, as the previously defeated King Ghidorah has ravaged the Exilians' homeworld and driven them to live underground. The Exilians ask for their Earthlings to let them borrow Godzilla and Rodan from their homes, and take them to Planet X so they can defeat King Ghidorah for them. When Glenn and Fuji get back to Earth, the world decides to trust the Exilian race, in exchange for the alleged cure to cancer the Planet X people claim they have. Now for plot B. Tetsuo, an inventor played by Akira Kubo, is having difficulties trying to win over his fiance's brother, who so happens to be Fuji. Fuji won't let him marry his sister until he can prove himself, and that's exactly what Tetsuo does. He sells a lady guard device, quote unquote, that lets out a loud buzzing sound to a toy company represented by Miss Namikawa, played by the beautiful Kumi Mizuno. This mysterious woman buys his product, but keeps dodging his attempts at seeing how far along the project actually is. Please trust me, this is important. Godzilla and Rodan are sent to Planet X to beat the ever-loving shit out of Ghidorah, which they do in one of the most iconic scenes in the entire series. They're both left on Planet X, but the humans are given their cure to cancer, which is actually just a tape. This tape, when played by human recorders, tells the human race that the Exilians were actually grooming humanity into the perfect conditions to be conquered by the Exilian forces all along. With Godzilla, Rodan, and King Ghidorah under their control, the Earth must work together to finally disarm the Exilians and put a stop to their plans for good. Turns out, Miss Namikawa is an Exilian slave, who bought Tetsuo's device so they can destroy it. Why? The only weakness to the Exilian invasion force is the very same sound the Lady Guard makes. This is the Exilians' downfall, cleverly intertwining every plotline into a nice, consequential conclusion. Once the Exilians are destroyed, the monsters have one last climactic battle to protect the planet they call home from Ghidorah. It's short but sweet. It's the best, most impactful slamfest you could ask for in such a small amount of screen time. That fight is some good chaotic fun, dude. The story is far more developed than its predecessor. It's so sci-fi it hurts. It's telling that the movie with one of the shortest screen times for Godzilla is actually so entertaining. The pacing is slow for the first act. It doesn't rush anything, and you'd think that would be a bad thing. But in actuality, its slow first act is rectified by this film's simpler, more focused plot. The Exilians and whether we can trust them is the main plotline. It's concise and knows the story it wants to tell. Characters are introduced at the appropriate times, and all the characters mean something to the plot. This movie's set of characters is nothing necessarily deep, of course, but are nonetheless interesting and played with a lot of expression and care. Akira Takarada does a great job being an assholey brother character, and Nick Adams just owns his hotshot American character type with grace. The best acting here is done by Kumi Mizuno, whose role as Miss Namikawa would leave a lasting impact on this film's audience for decades, becoming one of the few Godzilla characters people actively love and remember by name. Miss Namikawa falls in love with Glenn, and she's persecuted for it by her Exilian father race, whose overdependence on machines for critical thinking forces them to kill her for her disobedience. Now, it's hard to kind of describe to you why this film works, because unlike the original Godzilla film, Astro Monster has an ensemble cast, aka the cast is large and there isn't too much of a focus on one specific character. Meaning, the characters are mainly used as cogs in a metaphorical machine, being humanity. They all represent Earth. The personalities of these characters aren't one note, but they aren't complex by any means either. The reason why they're important to the plot is that all of their efforts to work together as a team is how they're able to save the world, which also may be the reason why it's actually easy to remember these characters after you watch the movie. The collective aspect of the human plotline gives space for each character's specific traits to be somewhat accentuated. The confident American player, the stubborn big brother, the nerdy inventor, the femme fatale who falls in love against her people's will. It's all so simple but memorable. You can't help but love the melodrama. As the plot escalates, it picks up, and the slow beginning morphs into an exciting, dramatic sci-fi blast that entertains all the way through. The film has a solid brick script and a rather optimistic outlook on humans as opposed to the past entries. In the preceding movies, humanity is mocked and exposed for its ignorance, and the folly of man seems to be the overarching theme of the entire franchise up to this point. But Invasion of Astro Monster offers the opposite. That with the miracle of science and human ingenuity, we can solve any crisis as long as we work together. The space theme specific to this movie gives Astro Monster a very distinct identity, as it's really the only Godzilla movie to partially take place on an alien planet. The film is confident with its story, confident with its script, and more than competent as a sci-fi monster movie, with all the charm, style, resourcefulness, and the grace that the best of these four men's portfolio has to offer. There is something about the movie that could have been improved upon. Of course, I'm the kind of guy that will always appreciate more character-focused flicks, but I do realize that Astro Monster isn't that kind of movie. It's a 60s monster movie. I don't think we should expect such deep exploration all the time with this kind of stuff. It's meant to be the way it is, completely by design. So I'm okay with it. For instance, you can totally go deeper with Namikawa's arc, but I understand that maybe it wasn't their intention to go deeper. On another note, I did notice that I think a lot of this movie's budget was spent on sets and special effects, which is fine, and the end product is still a fun, good movie. The part I noticed could have been expanded upon was a section where they describe the chaos that occurs on Earth after the Exilians reveal their plan. I feel like they didn't have the resources to make a real, chaotic crowd scene, letting us actually see that chaos. But really, the slideshow we get does the job well enough, I suppose. Since Raids Again, the cinematography has been straying further and further away from the more intentful and artistically motivated framing for the 1954 original. In this movie, and a lot of the Showa series, the cinematography really is just very functional. It does what it needs to do. But with that in mind, the great individual shots that are in the film seem to be more grand and striking due to their low quantity. Invasion of Astro Monster can take a little bit to get going, but it's building a good foundation for what's to come later in the film. By the second half, it gets up and running pretty damn well. Godzilla fights like a boxer, which just adds to the charm. The fights are some of the most memorable in the series, as long as you disregard the fact that they're still using the Rodan suit from the last film, which, if you haven't noticed, looks pretty questionable compared with its 1956 counterpart. Exciting story, memorable characters, and a sci-fi edge make this yet another landmark flick for this timeless character. This movie, with its distinct aura, really just cements my love for this era of the character, to be honest with you. And looking at these movies, I really want to give each film its own chance to shine, because Astro Monster is a pure example of how wildly creative and different and just imaginative all these films really are.